Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on 3D Experience Administration Tools. My name is Mark Young, and my colleague Elon Majar will be joining me on this webinar as well. I'll be the main presenter, though my colleague Elon will fill in if and when necessary. And quick note to Elon, you may be muted. So once again, thank you for this webinar. Quick introductions of XLM Solutions. We are what we consider a full PLM solution provider, and we're really specializing on the Dassault PLM product line. So that being 3DEXPERIENCE or Innovia, which we'll be talking about today, and we work with both the cloud and on-premise versions of the solution. We also have extensive experience around the SolidWorks PDM and the SolidWorks PDM and managed products, Innovia Smart Team being a legacy solution from Dassault for those of you that are familiar with it, and the XLEAD search tools and data aggregation tools from Dassault as well. We've been around since 2005, so we bring many years of experience within the PLM industry, and we really pride ourselves for being highly respected in both our business and technical expertise. We are a Dassault business partner along with a SolidWorks certified professional service company. And we really pride ourselves, again, being dedicated to quality and excellence. We're always staying up to date on the latest best practices, new technologies that are out there, etc. As a company, we provide all aspects of PDM, PLM implementation. So we do everything from discovery workshops, general implementations, customizations, data integrations to other systems like ERP, data migrations, training and support. We have a lot of expertise in various industries and provide a lot of good general IT expertise as well regarding databases, operating systems, various programming languages, and even new technologies and programming within 3DEXPERIENCE, such as the EKL language and widget development. So enough about XLM Solutions. Let's jump into data administration. So today we'll talk about some of the tools that used to be used to administer Innovia or 3DEXPERIENCE, but are no longer available after the 2018 version. We'll talk about MQL in general, which is a great tool to manipulate and look at data within the system. We'll then talk about the Collaborative Space Control app, which is more of a front-end administrative tool to manage behaviors and configurations within the platform. The majority of the presentation will most likely be around the data model customization app, or the TXO as the trigram. And this is how you can extend the data model, pretty much adding types and fields to it. Then we'll just talk a little bit about platform management, maintenance, members and community, stores, etc., and then conclude. So, for everyone that used to be familiar with Innovia or 3DEXPERIENCE, before 2018X, there were two tools that looked maybe a little bit outdated because they've been around probably since the late 90s, but were good GUI related tools to look at data, manipulate data, and make changes to the system. And they were called Business, where Business allowed you to change business behaviors within the system, such as types and policies, triggers, attributes. And then Matrix, which allowed you to view data, create relationships within the system. And those tools now are no longer supported after 18X. So part of this presentation is how can you still do your job without these tools? And we'll talk about that. A lot of what you can do from a customization point of view is documented already within the Dassault help documents. So a lot of the stuff that you'll be seeing is accessible and can be reviewed and can be found within the Dassault help documents. For example, customization processes, Dassault has some good information or help on it and the different aspects of what you can do. So let's talk about MQL briefly. So first of all, MQL, or be able to run MQL, can really only be used if you're an on-premise user of 3DEXPERIENCE. For those of you that are using the public cloud, you do not have access to MQL. But MQL is really a console application. It's a standalone application, and it can be found under your 3D Space install folder, where you would need to obviously install the studio tools, but under the 3D Space install folder, WinBin 64 code bin. And it can be installed obviously on the server, or it can be installed on other remote machines by installing the studio package from the Dassault website. You can run MQL as a standalone program, or you can run it from within the 3DEXPERIENCE or the 3D Space web apps. If you run it directly, through the executable, you're kind of talking directly to the system. If you're doing it through a web app, you're talking through the Tommy 3D Space URL server, so it's going through one extra step. Though when you're going through the server, it is using all the server settings, and when you're going directly, it's using local client settings. So you got to be careful that your settings are the same, or you may actually see different behaviors between the two. For example, we were manipulating data, and when we did it directly through the MQL executable, the data wasn't coming in correctly. And we realized that our database connection from the client was using a different character set than what the server was. So once we made those character sets the same, everything worked. Not to get too much into details, but you could see different behaviors based on how you run the different MQL tools or where you run them from. Though that being said, there hasn't really been much change since earlier versions of 2018X. And so if you're already familiar with the MQL tools, then not much has changed. However, we should note a couple things. There's been a couple commands in MQL that you no longer see in the help or the user guides. Now, those commands are still there, but you don't longer see them. So Dassault may be trying to remove them or don't want you to run them. So beware of that. Now, we've seen everything work as is, but we've seen some of those commands don't show up in the help. Though in addition, though, they've added some enhancements, and many of the enhancements have been around being able to run the search indexes. So going forward, 3DEXPERIENCE is making use of the XLM search engine or the cloud view, and they've added MQL commands to run Simulus MQL crawlers to index all your data, validate the indexes, etc. The MQL trace command has been enhanced for access control lists. So access control lists are the security lists contained within the system of what you can and cannot see. And again, when you do searches, making use of the XLM cloud view, it references the access control list to see if you can see that data or access that data or not. And hence MQL has been enhanced to be able to better access and look at those control lists. They've added a path command, and we'll talk about path in a second, but paths are pretty much a type of relationship, and they're used a lot in the VPLM data model, which is the new data model that's used by Powered By or CATIA 3DX. And so there is path commands now added to MQL. However, like I said, all the mainstream commands, print, temp, query, bus, expand, are all the same and are all working. Going back a slide, there was a question, why did Dassault remove the matrix and business tools? So there's no clear answer, though my guesstimate is twofold. One is there's a big push for the cloud, and there was probably no good way to run the those tools on the cloud. So they wanted to show that they no longer existed, or that you can do everything through a web interface. Two, Dassault probably wants to limit the amount of, let's say, configuration / customization that's done on the system. And as those tools, easily allowed you to configure and customize the system, they wanted to prevent that data, or prevent users from being able to do that. And then in addition, there wasn't really a big support for the powered by or the UPS data model. So again, removing those tools because they couldn't manipulate that powered by or UPS data model was another reason. And then finally, as you've seen, if we go back a slide, the interfaces are very old, 1990-esque, and perhaps there was some technology issues or security issues along with those tools that they wanted to prevent or didn't want to fix. So it was just easy enough to to remove them. So I'm sure it was a combination of the issues I mentioned, why they were removed. Now, whether those are valid reasons or not is up to debate. I will agree that I think they were powerful tools and served a purpose, and will be missed. But we'll talk about what you can do without them, hence the presentation. So let's talk about paths a little bit through MQL. And if you look at this diagram, this is a diagram of a change action that is really related to different physical products that are going to be changed or have been changed. So the data model, just to connect a physical product to a change action, isn't a one-to-one relationship. There's many intermediate objects or relationships between the two. So from a change action, you got to go to proposed activities, and then go from a to to from of the proposed activities to a path, and then you can have an activity like a what, where, or why, and then that will go through a path to actually the physical product or the physical ID. So you see there's these paths that are associated to the between the change action and the physical product. A path is similar to a relationship, but it's has a slightly different name. But example here is the MQL command to get the physical ID of physical products associated to a change action. So let's talk about some of the tools you can use that that are not within 3D within the Studio and Matrix tools to do work. So one of the key tools, and this tool works both on cloud and on premise, is the collaborative space control tool. So this allows platform managers to configure various aspects and behaviors of 3DEXPERIENCE, such as some naming, some revision rules, lifecycle rules, access rules, etc. There's information on it. For example, within 3ds.com, you can follow this, path or tree structure and read all about it Here's a listing of different sections where it describes the different behaviors. So I'm going to give you just a quick tutorial of some of them. So if we jump into my platform here, and if we do a search for the collaborative platform tool, we now can pick, if we had different collaborative spaces, and collaborative spaces can be a whole another topic, but we can then set up different behaviors or configurations of the system for our different collaborative spaces. So we can pick a collaborative space, and the first tool out there is attribute management. And like it says, it allows us to add attributes to different types within the system. So we can make this guy bigger, move this out of the way, or maybe not. But we can pick what physical type we want to extend. So if we say we want to extend a physical product, we can pick it, and then we can add different attributes that we want. So we can pick what type of attribute it is, and give it a name. This will be called lead time. You can have a default value. If it was like an integer or some other field, we can give it a dimension, or units like inches, meters, etc. If it was a pick list, some of these would be enabled. Is it mandatory? When we duplicate or make a copy as, does that get reset? Is it read only? Is it searchable? If it was a pull down, some various values. So we can set different behaviors or values to it, and then deal with 6W predicates. So how is that searching, or how is that going to show up within the 6W tags when we do searching? So we can simply say OK, and then you can list the different attributes or custom attributes that we added to the system. Hit apply, say yes, and now it will apply it to the system. Some things to be aware of, though, when you add attributes, they get added to the system, but you don't really have a good control of how to order them in the system. So how they show up, and usually the first one you add, shows up after the existing ones. But if you wanted to add them in a special order, you really should have that order set up beforehand to make sure they get them added into the order. Once they get added, there's no good way to manipulate them within the web form or the widget. Hopefully that'll be coming soon. The next one is content naming rules. And every time you create a new object within the system, there is a number field, and that gets set based on, if you have it set based on an automatic number, based on some rules. So you can pick what type of object you would want a number for, and then associate that, have a prefix, could have a suffix, could have an interfix if you wanted, and then have a counter and a separator. So as you can see, for every item created, or every issue, it would be of this format. And that would go in the number field. And you can do that for any physical or any object or any type within the system. And we, again, maybe on another presentation, can show how we expanded this using EKL to give this numbering more flexible and assign it to other fields within the system, not just the number field. And then we can apply it as well in the system. Revision numbering. So for those of you on premise, you can do a lot more with revision numbering, but through out of the box, for different types or different types that are revisionable in the system, there are some predefined revision sequences that can be used. For example, document release, can use 123, 0123, dash ABC, though it's skipping the military spec numbers, or purely ABC, I assume up to ZZZ. I haven't gone past Z to see how that behaves. But you can assign different revision schemes to these. Unfortunately, if there's a revision scheme that's not listed and you want to use, then either you need to configure your own. Hopefully you're on premise, and if you're on cloud, unfortunately you're out of luck. So be aware of that when assigning revision schemes, if you're going to only use this tool to assign revision schemes, and for cloud customers this is the only tool to use, these are the ones that are available. Access rules. So again, access rules can be another topic for a whole presentation, and we talk about P&O, people and organizations, and security around collaborative spaces. That could be another webinar. But here, based on different accesses, such as read operations, you can control some additional functionality. For example, allowed read to access in-work content in protected or provided work collaborative spaces. So if you have data that's in a protected or a private collab space and you give read access to it, can users, maybe not in that space, still be able to read the data, maybe not manipulate the data. I gotta move this out of the way. Different modify permissions, for example, if you're a leader, and can you allow modify if the content is in the frozen state, or does it have to be demoted back to the release state? If you're the owner, can you modify data in a release state? So there's different additional permission behaviors that you can set up in the system. Which states can you create new revisions from based on the maturity state? So not going to go through all of them here, but probably good to look through it and see what's available. And then maturity graphs. So maturity graphs are like the policy or the states that the objects can go through. And for example, an EC part, which is the traditional parts, you can see the different states that it will go to. And you can actually create, for some, not all, you can create additional transitions between different states. I guess this one doesn't look like you can do it, but you can create additional transition states, and you can add additional rules to them as well. So there is some manipulation of transitions and states that can be done within the system, and I'll show you that within the next slide. So, and we'll talk about the transition manipulation secondly, but with regard to adding 6W tags, you can definitely add custom 6W tags to the system as well. A lot of times that is done by, you'll create an RDF file that describes the 6W tags and where they're associated and the fields are associated. You'll obviously create your new your field or attribute using the data model customization or the collaborative space control new attribute that I showed you. And then you'll want to run some commands to update the indexing model and reload cache to get that 6W tag in the system. And then all new objects created will reflect those values in searches based on the 6W tag. So again, we can elaborate on that offline if needed, but you also have the ability to add your own 6W tags and configure them in the system as well. Going back to the engineering definition for for example, a change control object. As you can see here, we've added some additional transition nodes, and then we put some rules in there. So based on certain conditions of the data, we can say automatically don't allow the promote or promote it back based on some rules. So this tool gives you the ability to add some rules to control how the the state definitions and behaviors work. And again, if you need a further explanation, we can talk about it offline. So now we're going to talk more about the data model customization tool, or the TXO. And again, a lot of the information that we're going to show you is documented within the Dassault help guides within the system, and you can reference them in more detail, if and when you explore that in more depth. So data model customization, TXO, is a set of tools to customize and manage your data model. As mentioned, you can look at the help within the Dassault system. It allows you to customize the data model and conform to unified typing. So one term you may see a lot is called unified typing. So that's the new way of adding attributes and extending the data model. The old term is I'm trying to blank on it right now, but the new term going forward is called unified typing, and attributes and objects are created through unified typing, based on using this TXO or data model customization tool and or the attributes extension tool that I showed you. And you can create specialized types and extensions. Basically, you're deriving types from existing types in the system and adding attributes and behaviors to it. So let's go look at that in more detail. So I'm going to search here for data model customization. And that's going to bring up this data model customization tool. And the first thing that you see here is how this tool works is you create packages, and then you assign your data model customizations, quote unquote, to those packages, and then you deploy those packages. So by default, out of the box, there are two packages that are created that start with OTB, and I believe they stand for out of the box. But these are really the packages that you can't do anything with, but if you look at them, really contains all the different types within the system. And then you can see if additional attributes were added to any of the existing types. For example, VPLM reference, which is really the physical product, you see it here as well. I think XP stands for extended, but I'm not sure exactly. one thing to note here, these names of the types that you see through these packages are the internal names of what they're called. For example, this says VPLM reference, but it really relates to the physical product object that is seen through the user interface. But we can create our own packages as well. So to do that, we can go to Manage Packages. We can say New Package, or we can import a package that was already created, but we can create a new package by going here. So we can create a new package and give it a name, and it could be derived from an existing package if need be. And this bear a second. So while we wait, are there any additional questions as my system runs? So one of the things that is happening right now is the packages that we create need to be derived from an existing package. So we need to understand what we want to extend. And for example, in this case, let's say we want to extend a change action. So we can look for change in the system. I just wanted to sort. So we can look for our change class here. It's change management. And say submit. So now we're going to be extending the change management types. Give it a name. And give it a prefix value. Each package has a prefix. And say done. So now I have this change package here. I can click on it. And you can see here are the different out-of-the-box types that are associated with change, and we can extend them now. So for example, for a change action, I can add additional subtypes. So I can give this a name, XLM CA, and say it's an abstract, meaning it's a middle class or not, or some other information, and say done. Because I can't have spaces. And now we could build different types of change actions. Maybe we want a customer A change action, vendor B change action. I don't know if necessarily you'd want change actions per each customer, but you could have different types of change actions based on some specific business rules. From the change action, we can click on that and we can add attributes. So we can add attributes to the system. And the same type of behaviors that you saw adding attributes, through the platform management tool, you see here too. It's very similar. So I can say done. I can add another attribute. Now, in addition to adding types and attributes to types, there's the topic of extensions, or what's called customer extensions. So you can add, and I'll show you how an extension works versus adding attributes, but we can add an additional extension to the system. Oop, I hit deploy. I will do that at the end, but we'll get to that. But we can add an extension to the system, and we can give it a name. And then from the extension itself, we can add attributes. So once we have everything configured and set up, we need to deploy the package. So you click this icon to deploy the package, and you will see this says no now, but after we deploy it, it now says yes to deploy. And if we go down here and we do a refresh, we see that it's also deployed too. Last thing we can do is there's manage NLS. So if we look at our package that we created and hit edit, basically these, what you see here, are how the fields will look to the users. But we can put in external names and put in different values based on different languages within the system. So I'm going to put one in that is, because I'm set for English. So for English, I'm going to put this in, which is going to look a little bit nicer. And this one I'll leave below. And this one, again, I'll do the same thing. And leave the other one alone. So then I can save all this. Oops, excuse me. We also can change the names of the types too. So I created types. We can also change the name of those as well. So for example, for this type, we can give it a name as, that's the package, but we can give this a name as an XLM CA. So let's see this in work. I'm now going to create a change action. And when I click on change action, I now have, I might have to redeploy after I made the names, but now I have different change actions. I have one that I created before when I did a similar demo for Co, and then one I just created right now. So I'm going to pick that one, say select, fill in other information. And now if you look at my change action down below, you will see, or you should see, different additional extended attributes showing up based on what we changed. So we can edit it. And wait a second while this gets edited. Or let's do a quick refresh. So of course, when we do a demo, we'll run into an issue, but let's do that again. Let's just go back to search. Go to our packages, and let's just make sure we deploy everything. All right, so now when we go to, let's create a change action again. I might need to log out and log. Oh, here's the change action that I just created, and I'll select that, give it a title. And then we have our change action, and we have the attributes that we entered, and you can see the ones that are set up based on NLS versus the internal names that I didn't do an NLS on. Also, you have what I mentioned is extensions. So if you remember, I added attributes to the type, but I also created an extension. So if we go to customer extensions, we can add an extension, and it tells you what extensions you have available to add. And maybe we just have one called the XLM CA. So we can pick that. Oop, that did not work. Let's try that one more time. All right, I'm not sure why this is not coming up. But you should be able to add a customer extension as well. Maybe I have to redeploy that too. And I can show you that in a different object. So let's do one more thing. Let's create a new change here. And let's pick this change action. And now if we go to customer extensions, add extension, should be able to see my extensions in the system. I can pick the extension that was created based on that specific type. It gets submitted. I can add the various attributes that were associated to it. Whatever they are. And you can see your extended attributes are added to the system as well. So not only does this work from 3D space, but once you go through TXO or data model tool, you can also see it through widgets. So if we go here, go to our change widget. We search for a CA. I didn't like that. Let me try that one more time. Give it a second. We want to do this change action. And again, if there's any questions while we wait, please let me know. Of course, it doesn't show my change actions, but they should show up, and you should be able to see the specific types and the extended types in there. Let's do exchange management. Maybe that was the reason. Hold on one second. So it may be what might be slow is indexing is going on, and that's why it may not be able to find it right now. So my indexing could be slow or off, and that may be the issue. But we can come back to this if there's time. Let's just give it one more second. All right, so we'll come back to the widget here. If we go back to data model, and one thing it may be, you know what, let me try one more thing here. I am going to change my credentials. Oops, in the app. So let's do one more thing here. Let's go back to change actions. And then we can change our credentials here. So it is common space leader. Let's do default leader. Let's see if that makes it different. It looks like it did not. So we'll have to come back why our changes aren't showing up through the widget. But the changes that you did see are reflected in the attribute is the key piece. If you go back to data model customization tool, there is also what's called the administrative data model. And this kind of works a little bit backwards, I would say, than the specialized data model. So in this case, you can create an extension, add attributes to the extension, and then assign those extensions to one or more types in the system. So example, you had a, you're dealing with the old, let's say, XCAD data model dealing with SolidWorks parts, drawings and assemblies, and you wanted to add attributes to them. Well, you could add attributes to each type individually, or you could create an extension, add your attributes to the extension, and then add that extension to all the different types. So in this case is where you add types and attributes and extensions to the types. In this case, you can create an extension and then add those extensions to different types that already exist in the system. We talked about manage NLS, where we can put in different names based on the languages. Download CATIA INI. So if you're using CATIA or more specifically the native applications, that reads a specific NLS file to set up how the languages and attributes are named. So you can download this file, you then just deploy that file to all your native clients installs to a specific directory, and then it will pick up the NLS settings that you created here as well. And then finally, this is a little bit out of scope to managing the data model and business rules, but through this app, you can also add customizations to the system as well. So through manage business rules, you have what's called different openings in the systems or different groupings of where you can customize parts of the platform. For example, business logic for validation on the server. You can see there are different events that you can add actual code to. So pre-check maturity, post-check maturity, etc. And per these events, we can add, and this is where EKL comes in, we can add our own EKL logic to control some of those events. And writing and creating EKL logic is probably, again, its own webinar and class. We can take that offline if anyone's interested in it, but you can do that. Note, you can use this tool to add some of the EKL logic here, or there's a native app tool, which is actually a little bit more richer to do the same thing. Also, I've had hit or miss with some of these validation rules working on the server. In some cases, you can get it to trigger and fire and work. In other cases, it just ignores it. So I believe that Dassault is maturing this functionality of the ability to, hook in some customization code and do some work, do some manipulation with it. So even though you see it here, don't just assume it's going to work. You need to validate it to make sure it works as well. Also, the the error checking, debugging, etc., is not the greatest. So you're limited with some of the debug functionality, to validate how your EKL code works as well. But it's a start. There is an opening. You can add custom logic and do some cool stuff with it. So with that, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So some of the things that you cannot do in TXO is you cannot create generic root or custom types. So every type that we extended was based on an existing type in the system. You cannot create your own types, at the root level. Now, there is also the concept of baseline, which is kind of the out-of-the-box solution versus customer specific. We were looking at a baseline image. I think, or I read that you may be able to create your own root types with the custom specific image, but I'm not sure if that is actually doable through TXO or you'd have to do it through MQL. You cannot change policies through TXO. So the policies are kind of what they are. You can do things obviously through MQL still, and do some manipulation through the engineering definition tool that I showed you, but you can't really manipulate policies. You cannot assign attributes to more than one type. So through the old tools, you could create an attribute and assign it to more than one type. In this case, what you would do is you would create an extension, assign the attribute to the extension, and then assign the extension to the type. So that's how that would would work. The web UI configuration or manipulation, how fields are shown, again, there's no ability to change that through the TXO tool. And then when dealing with NLS, there are some issues or behaviors. If you wanted to have a blank value, if you had a pull down and you wanted to have one of them be blanks, it doesn't like that. But you could put spaces in, which looks like a blank, and that would work for the NLS as well. So in conclusion, any administration that could be done pre-2020X can still be done today. It just may be a different tool and it may not have that same GUI interface. Widget customization, we didn't talk about widgets much, but if we got the widget to show, you would see it would have shown the attributes and the type, but you're not allowed to create for example, a change action through a widget and pick the type. So the ability to configure or customize data shown in the widget is still gaining in functionality. It's there, it's a start, but it's not all the way there. And then with any configuration, you always need to balance out of the box functionality versus specific company business requirements and really understand where it makes sense to configure or customize or adapt to out of the box functionality. But with that, I'd like to say thank you. Here is, and I know Elon was quiet, but here's my and Elon's contact information, and I will open it up to any questions. So, do we have any more questions? All right, we have a couple questions. So one comment was collaborative space control works for baseline only. Some functionality doesn't work under the CSC or the customer specific behavior. And that is true. Obviously, a lot of those collaborative space control apps were geared based on the baseline behavior. And if you have CSE, some of them may not work. Now, how is Dassault handling that or treating them is probably more a question to Dassault. But for example, security under collaborative controls on baseline would definitely be different than versus CSE. Are those tools, for example, the TXO tool, okay to use with CSE environments? And I believe the answer is yes, they should work with CSE environments as well. And the documentation talks about that a little bit. Does the demo include adding business rules? So at the end, I showed you how to add business rules or customizations through EKL. We're already running up against time, so no, but we can take that offline, or please contact me, and we could set up a way how we could talk about adding business rules to the system. Finally, there was a message about Spinner. So I didn't talk about Spinner, but one of the things with packages is you can basically create a package of your changes, your different types and attributes, and then save that package out, and then deploy that package in other environments. So for those of you that are familiar with Spinner, Spinner is a tool by Dassault. It's a paid tool where you can make changes and really spin out those changes and then to an Excel file, and then use that Excel file and spin it into other environments. So with TXO, you have similar functionality as well. NLS, yes, should work with the ability to save packages and move them from environments or not. It looks like one of the participants, if I can do it, may want to be unmuted. Let me see if I can do that. So Mr. Ed or Mr. Fennon, you are unmuted. If you want to say anything, feel free. Though it may look like the unmuting is not taking place. So oh, it looks like he doesn't want to talk anymore. I think that's all the questions for now, and we're over our time, but if anyone has any additional follow-up, let me know. I apologize that my widget wasn't able to show the items we created, but I wanted to reflect that the attributes and the extensions that we did add, are visible from the widget. But the key thing is you can't create an object through a widget and use those attributes. You still need to create it through the 3D space, but they are viewable in the widget. With that, once again, thank you very much, and please reach out to me or Elon if you have any questions, comments, etc. Thank you.